Richard Ashford laid a single sheet of paper on the marble dining table and slid it toward his daughter without a word. 5 names, 5 fortunes, 5 men he had already chosen for her. By Friday, he said, or Brendan takes the company. Sienna Ashford did not pick up the list. She walked out of the dining hall, down the long staircase, past the wine cellar, and stopped at the door of the boiler room. A man in a gray jacket was kneeling beside the old furnace, one hand black with grease, the other steady on a wrench. He did not look up when she entered. She glanced at the list in her fingers, then at him, a name not on the paper. The boiler room smelled of iron and warm dust. Sienna stayed at the threshold longer than she meant to, watching the stranger work. He did not hum, did not curse, did not check his phone. He simply listened to the furnace the way a doctor listens to a chest. "It's been making a sound," she said finally. "I know." He did not turn around. His voice was low, used to silence. "The pressure valve is fine," he continued. "Your relief line is iced over. Whoever ran the last service skipped the bleed cycle. I'll fix it tonight." Sienna stepped inside. She had grown up in this house. No one had ever told her something about her own home in a tone that flat, that certain. The contractors who came through these halls always opened with a wince and a number, with the polite calculation of men who were already planning to overcharge her. This man had not even glanced at her shoes. "What's your name?" "Ethan." "Ethan what?" "Carter." He still did not turn. He reached for a smaller tool, set it down, picked another. The way his hand moved over the brass fitting was not the way a maintenance man moved. It was slower, quieter, as if the metal were a living thing that needed to be coaxed. "You don't ask who I am," she said. "You came down to a basement at 7 in the evening in a cashmere coat. I assume you live here. Most people guess my last name. I don't guess. I fix things." She almost laughed. Instead, she watched him reseat the line, feel for the pressure with 2 fingers, and listen again. He closed his eyes for a moment, the way a musician closes his eyes to hear a note that is not quite right. The furnace settled. A long, low exhale, like a tired animal. "Done," he said. He stood, knees stiff. He was taller than she had expected, and thinner. He folded his rag, slid each tool back into its scarred metal box, latched it with care. On the small workbench beside him sat a child's lunch tin, painted with a faded rabbit, and a folded sheet of construction paper. Crayon lines, a house, a sun, 2 stick figures holding hands. Sienna saw the drawing. She did not ask. "How long have you been working in this house?" she said. 3 weeks. "I rotate through the contractor list, and before that, other buildings." He picked up the lunch tin and the drawing, and slid both into his jacket pocket with the same quiet care he had given the brass fittings. He took a small notebook from his back pocket, wrote 3 lines in pencil, tore the page free, and left it on the bench beside the furnace. Notes, she realized, for whoever came after him. He was not the kind of man who left work half done for the next person to clean up. A figure passed in the hallway behind her. Margaret Pierce, the housekeeper for 31 years, paused at the doorway and looked into the room. Her eyes met Ethan's for less than a second. She did not greet him. She did not nod. She turned and walked on. Sienna watched the woman go. "Margaret knows you," she said. "A lot of people know a maintenance guy." She didn't say hello. She doesn't have to. He stepped past her toward the door, careful not to brush her sleeve. At the threshold he paused, half-turned, as if he had remembered something. "The valve will hold for another winter. After that, replace the unit. The whole unit. Don't let them just patch it again." "Why are you telling me?" "Because nobody else will." He left. She heard his boots on the stone steps, even and unhurried, until the side door closed behind him. Sienna stood in the warm, ticking silence of the boiler room. The list was still in her hand. She looked down at the 5 names her father had chosen. She did not see any of them. She saw a man in a gray jacket who had not asked who she was. She caught him in the service corridor the next evening, just before he left. The hallway smelled faintly of wet wool. His toolbox was already in his hand. "Mr. Carter." A word. He stopped. He did not sigh. He simply waited. "I have a proposal," she said. "It's not personal. It's a contract. 6 months. We marry on paper. You appear at 3 corporate events. Then we file $200,000 in your account when we sign. Full college tuition for your daughter. Paid into a trust she cannot touch until she's 18. His expression did not move. Margaret told you about my daughter, I asked. She didn't volunteer. You asked a stranger about a child. I asked a woman I've known my whole life about a man I'm considering marrying. Yes, he looked at her then. Really looked. The corridor was bare and bright, and she felt, for the first time in her adult life, that someone was reading her clearly. No, you haven't heard the terms. I heard enough. The answer is no, Mr. Carter. My daughter is not a line in your contract. Her future is not a chip you put on the table to win a board seat. I don't care how much money you have. You don't get to buy her tuition by renting her father. He did not raise his voice. That was what struck her. He said it the way he had spoken to the furnace. Good night, Miss Ashford. He walked away. He did not slam the door behind him. He closed it the way he closed every door, with the quiet assurance of a man who had already decided not to come back. Sienna stood alone in the corridor. She had been refused before, of course, by markets, by weather, by her father, in small and careful ways. But she had never been refused by a person who simply did not need what she was offering. Every man she had ever negotiated with had wanted something. Land, access, her name. The stranger in the gray jacket had not wanted any of it. She did not feel insulted. She felt curious. That night, near 11, her phone rang. It was Margaret. Margaret never called. In 31 years, Margaret had never once called Sienna's personal line. Sienna answered before the second ring. There's been an emergency, the older woman said. Mr. Carter's daughter. An allergic reaction. They took her to Mass General. Why are you telling me? Because you should know. Sienna was in her car before she finished pulling on her coat. She did not stop to ask herself why. The streets were wet. The harbor lights smeared across her windshield. She drove faster than she should have, and did not slow until she saw the red sign of the emergency entrance. The hospital corridor was the white of bone. Ethan was already there, standing at the nurse's station, both hands flat on the counter, as if the counter were the only thing holding him upright. He turned. He saw her. His face went through 3 things in 1 second, and none of them were welcome. What are you doing here? I came to apologize for earlier. Now is not. I'm not staying. I just wanted you to know I heard what you said. A nurse leaned over the desk. Mr. Carter, she's stable. You can sit with her in 10 minutes. The word stable went through him visibly. His shoulders dropped half an inch. He let go of the counter. Sienna saw it. She did not comment. She sat down in a plastic chair against the wall. She did not leave. They sat through the long hours together, 2 strangers separated by 4 empty seats. He did not speak. She did not push. A janitor mopped the corridor at 3 in the morning. The ceiling lights buzzed on a frequency that lived just below thought. A woman across the hall cried softly into a paper cup of coffee, then stopped, then started again. No one asked why. At 4:15, a nurse beckoned. Ethan went in. Sienna stayed where she was. She was not invited. 20 minutes later, the nurse came back. He's asking if you'd come in. Sienna stood up. She felt oddly that she should smooth her hair, that she should do something with her hands. She did not. The room was small. A child lay in the bed, very small under the white sheet, with an IV taped to the back of one little hand. Ethan sat on the edge of the mattress, holding the other hand the way a man holds something he has already lost once. The girl's eyes opened. They were a clear, tired blue. She looked at Sienna for a long moment. You have hair like a fairy, the child whispered. Sienna laughed. It came out before she could stop it. The sound was rough and surprised, as if her own throat had forgotten how. She had not laughed in 7 weeks. She had not noticed until now. What's your name? She asked. Hazel. Min name's Sienna. That's a color. It is. Hazel smiled. A small, weak smile, and closed her eyes again. Ethan did not look at Sienna. He was looking at his daughter. His thumb moved, very slowly, across the back of her hand. Once, twice, as if to be sure the hand was warm. Sienna sat in the chair by the window. There was a thin paperback on the side table, a book of bedtime stories someone had left behind. She picked it up and read aloud softly, a story about a fox who lived under a bridge. Hazel slept. Ethan listened and did not interrupt. When the nurse came at 6 to check the IV, Ethan walked Sienna into the corridor. The hospital was beginning to wake. Carts moved. A coffee machine in the family lounge sputtered to life. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For reading. For not asking questions." She looked at him. His face in hospital light was older than she had thought. Not old, used. "I'm not going to make the offer again," she said. "Not the one I made yesterday." "Good. I'm going to make a different one." He waited. "Give me a real reason, not a contract. Something I can say to my father with my own voice. Tell me, in front of him, that you're someone in my life. 1 month. After that, if it doesn't work, we end it cleanly. No money, no trust, no paper at all." "Why would I agree to that?" "Because you already know how this story ends if I lose. The man my father wants me to marry is the man who runs your old industry into the ground. I can't stop him from inside my own boardroom anymore. I need someone he can't dismiss. He'll dismiss me in 5 seconds. He won't. Trust me. He'll be too busy underestimating you." Ethan looked through the small glass window at his sleeping daughter. He was quiet for a long time. The machine beside her bed ticked steadily. Then he nodded. Once. Friday came faster than either of them expected. Ethan arrived at the Ashford estate in a dark suit 10 years out of fashion. The jacket had been pressed that afternoon. His shoes were shined. He held Hazel's hand in his own, and Hazel wore a navy dress with a small white collar and looked up at the house like she had wandered into a museum. Richard met them in the hall. His eyes went over Ethan from collar to cuffs to scuffed shoe leather. His mouth did not move, but a small muscle in his jaw did. "Mr. Carter, sit. And the child, my daughter, Hazel." Richard did not bend down. Hazel looked at him, then looked at her father, then said very politely, "Hello." Sienna came down the stairs. She did not take Ethan's arm. She stopped at his shoulder, half a step back, and let him stand on his own. Brendan Locke was already in the dining room. He was 44, broad in the chest, with the easy smile of a man who had never been told no. He stood when they came in. He held out his hand to Ethan with the kind of grip that meant something. "Brendan Locke, Chief Operating Officer, family friend, Ethan Carter." "And what is it you do, Ethan?" "Building maintenance." "Hourly?" "Salaried." "Through a contractor." "How much, if you don't mind?" The table went very still. Sienna's hand tightened on the back of her chair. Ethan answered without flinching. $42,000 a year, plus health insurance for my daughter." Brendan let out a small, kind, terrible laugh. "Well, that's honest." Dinner was served. Hazel sat between her father and Sienna. She used her fork carefully. She said please and thank you to the server. She did not stare at the chandelier, though her eyes went to it twice. Ethan reached over once, without looking, and adjusted the napkin on her lap. He did it the way other men checked their watches. Sienna noticed. Halfway through the second course, Hazel reached for her glass of grape juice, and her elbow caught the rim. Purple bloomed across the white linen, ran along the edge, and dripped onto Brendan's pale gray sleeve. Brendan stood up fast. "For God's sake, I'm sorry," Hazel whispered. Her face went red. Ethan was already on one knee beside her chair. He lifted the hem of her sleeve clear of the spill. He took the cloth napkin from his lap, folded it once, and pressed it gently to the small circle of juice on her wrist where it had splashed. "It's okay, sweetheart. It's just juice. It's okay." His voice did not shake. He did not look at Brendan. Brendan was still standing. "That is a custom." "It's a sleeve," Sienna said. The room turned. Sienna had not raised her voice. She did not stand. She said it the way her father said most things, level and final, and she was looking directly at her own father when she said it. Richard set down his glass. He looked at his daughter. He looked at the man on one knee beside the child. He looked, for one long second, at Brendan, who was still on his feet with a napkin pressed to a stain that did not actually exist anymore. "Mr. Carter," Richard said, 1 month. You prove to me that there is something in you worth my daughter's name, or you walk out of this house and you do not come back. Are we clear?" "Yes, sir." "Good." Richard lifted his glass. To clarity, nobody else lifted theirs. Sienna packed 2 suitcases the next morning. By that evening she was carrying them up a narrow wooden staircase above a bakery on Hanover Street. The apartment had 2 small bedrooms, one window over the alley, one window over the street, and a kitchen the size of her old walk-in closet. The whole place smelled, faintly and constantly, of warm bread. Hazel showed her the bathroom, the light pull, the trick to the hot water tap, the cabinet where the Band-Aids lived. She was very serious about the Band-Aids. "Daddy says you have to be ready," Hazel told her, lining up 3 boxes by size. "You don't know when somebody's going to scrape a knee. That seems wise." "It is." That first night, Sienna stood at the sink and washed 3 plates, 2 forks, and a small saucepan. She had never washed a dish in her life. She watched her own hands move under the warm water with something close to wonder. The soap was lemon-scented. The dish towel was thin and plain and had been folded 1,000 times. Ethan made dinner. Pasta with butter and garlic and a lemon he zested over the top with a small grater. 3 plates, 1 yellow lamp over the table, Hazel between them. They did not talk much. Hazel hummed. Ethan refilled water. Sienna ate slowly and felt, for reasons she could not name, that she was being given something she had not earned. After dinner, Hazel pulled out a tin of crayons and laid a sheet of paper between them. "You draw the sky," she instructed Sienna. "I'll do the people. I can't draw. Everyone can draw a sky. Just blue at the top, and white in the middle, and pink at the bottom for sunset." Sienna picked up a blue crayon. Her hand was unsteady. She drew a clumsy stripe across the top of the page. Hazel nodded, satisfied. Ethan, at the sink, glanced over once, and the corner of his mouth moved very slightly. Sienna saw the look. She did not mention it. She drew a second stripe. "Now the white," Hazel said. "Press soft. That's the rule. I didn't know there were rules." "There are always rules. Daddy says so." Ethan lifted an eyebrow at the sink and did not turn around. Sienna pressed soft. The white blended into the blue and became something almost sky-shaped. Hazel put her own hand over Sienna's for a moment, guided it to the right place on the page, and let go. It was the smallest gesture. Sienna did not move for a full breath afterward. Later, after Hazel was in bed, Sienna went looking for a spare blanket. The hall closet was deep and old. On the top shelf, behind a stack of folded towels, her fingers brushed a metal box. She took it down. It was an engineer's filing case, dented, the latch worn. She opened it on the floor of the hallway. Patents, schematics, a bound report with a federal seal. The name on every cover page was the same: E. Carter, Principal Engineer, Geothermal Systems. The most recent date was 3 years and 4 months ago. She did not understand all of it. She understood enough to know that the man asleep in the next room was not, and had never been, a maintenance worker. She put the box back exactly as she had found it. She straightened the towels. She went to bed. She did not say a word. At the Ashford Holdings Tower across town the next morning, Brendan Locke stood in front of the records director's desk with a slim folder in his hand. "Pull anything we have on a Carter, Ethan. Engineering. He'd have left the company 3 years ago. Any specific project, geothermal. The one we mothballed." The director hesitated. "That archive is sealed." "By who?" "By you, sir." Brendan smiled. "Then I can unseal it. Today, by end of day. And keep it off the shared drive. Print the file. Walk it to my office. Just you. Are we clear?" "Yes, sir." The director left. Brendan stood at the window for a long time. The harbor was gray. A tanker was easing into berth. He picked up his phone. "Westcott. We need to move up the timeline. Tell your people I want the merger announcement on the Friday slate." Sienna found Margaret in the kitchen at the estate 3 days later. On a morning Ethan had taken Hazel to school. "Tell me about him." Margaret did not pretend to misunderstand. She set down the tea towel. "He worked for your father. For all of us. He led the geothermal project. The big one. The one that was supposed to take Ashford Holdings off oil money for good. And it was killed. 3 years ago. Officially, the test results came back inconclusive. The board pulled the funding. Mr. Carter resigned the same week. And his wife?" Margaret looked at the window for a long moment. She was driving home from the closure meeting. She'd come to pick him up. There was a truck. It was raining. It was a Tuesday. He carried Hazel out of the car himself. The girl was 4. Sienna sat down on a kitchen stool. She had not asked permission. Margaret poured her tea anyway. "Why did the project get killed?" "That isn't my place to say." "Margaret." The older woman sighed. She walked to a drawer at the end of the counter, the one she had kept her own things in since Sienna was 9. She pulled out a folded paper, soft at the edges. "I kept this. I shouldn't have. The cancellation order. the signature page. She placed it on the counter between them. The first signature line was the executive sponsor. It was not Richard Ashford. It was Brendan Locke. Sienna stared at it for a long time. Her fingers were cold around the cup. Outside, the gardener was raking the front lawn in long, slow rows. The sound of it came in through the kitchen window, even and indifferent. "Does my father know?" "Your father signs 40 papers a day." He trusted Brendan with the technical files. He did not read the appendix. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I am the housekeeper, and because Mr. Carter asked me not to. He said the project was over. He said the only thing that mattered now was the child. He asked me to keep his name out of this house. I have, until tonight." Sienna folded the paper very carefully and put it in her pocket. That night, she sat across from Ethan at the small kitchen table. Hazel was asleep. The bakery downstairs had closed. The street was finally quiet. "I know," she said. He understood at once. He did not pretend. "How much?" "Most of it. The project. Your wife." He looked at his hands. "I buried it," he said. "On purpose. I don't want it back. I want to raise my daughter and fix furnaces and sleep at night. I am not going back into that building." "I'm not asking you to." "Then why are you telling me?" "Because you should know who signed it." She put the folded paper on the table. He read the name. He did not move for a long time. His hand on the table closed slowly, then opened again, deliberately, as if he had decided not to make a fist tonight. Hazel's bedroom door opened. The little girl walked out in her pajamas, sleepy and pink-cheeked, and crossed straight to Sienna without hesitating. "Good night, my Sienna." He wrapped her thin arms around Sienna's neck. Sienna closed her eyes. Ethan stood in the kitchen doorway and watched. His face did not change. His eyes filled, slowly, for the first time in 3 years, and he did not wipe them. At the Ashford Holdings boardroom that afternoon, Brendan stood at the head of the long table and clicked through a presentation in clean, confident slides. The room was full. 12 directors, 3 observers, a junior counsel taking notes by the door. Westcott Petroleum brings $4 billion in operating capital. They bring distribution. They bring continuity. The geothermal pivot was a beautiful idea. It is not a financial one. We are a public company. We owe our shareholders growth. We do not owe them a press release. We committed publicly to a green portfolio, Sienna said. We committed to growth. Markets remember growth. They forget press releases. This board does not. This board, Brendan said, has been asked to sit through 3 weeks of your personal experiment, Sienna. The sudden engagement. The maintenance worker, a man, I might add, whose file I have right here. He set a folder on the table. Ethan Carter, former engineering manager, released for cause, system-level failure on a $500 million project. The kind of man you do not put in front of investors, the kind of man you certainly do not bring into the family. I would ask the chair to consider whether the daughter of this house has the judgment, currently, to set strategy for this company. Down the hall, the elevator opened. Ethan stepped out, holding Hazel's hand. She was wearing her school backpack, just picked up from the curb at 3:15. Sienna had promised her a tour of Mommy Sienna's office, which Hazel had been quoting for 2 days. They came around the corner. Through the glass door of the boardroom, Ethan saw the slide on the screen. He saw his own name. He stopped. He heard the last sentence Brendan said. He did not push the door open. He did not go in. He simply stood, very still, with his daughter's hand in his. "Daddy?" Hazel said. "It's all right, sweetheart." Inside the room, Sienna had risen from her chair. "You will not speak about him in this room again. I'll speak about whoever I want." The door opened. Hazel came through it first, because Hazel did not understand that she was not supposed to. She ran the length of the boardroom. She went straight to her father, who had followed her in. She held up a folded piece of paper. "I drew us. All 3. See? Daddy and Sienna and me, holding hands." Ethan dropped to one knee. He took the drawing. He looked at it for one long second. Then he leaned down and kissed his daughter's forehead. The room had gone quiet. 12 directors watched a man in a contractor's coat receive a crayon drawing from his child, as if it were a deed to a country. Hazel pulled back from her father's shoulder and looked, with great seriousness, at the table of grown-ups. "My daddy fixes things," she announced. "Even when they are very broken." One of the older directors, a woman with silver hair, set down her pen. She did not smile, but her eyes did something that was very close to it. Brendan opened his mouth and closed it again. Through the open door, Richard Ashford was walking past. He saw it. He stopped. He did not enter the room. He stood in the corridor and watched the man on one knee, and the child, and the drawing, and his own daughter standing between them and Brendan with her hands on the table. He kept walking. But he had seen. Sienna went to the records archive at 6 the next evening, with the master credentials she had inherited from her grandfather. The archivist at the desk looked up, blinked, and looked back down. The Ashford line credentials still opened any door in this building. She pulled the geothermal file, the real one, the original one, the one before the appendix. She read until midnight. The test results had been clean. The pilot site had outperformed projection by 11%. The internal review had recommended full deployment. A second set of test results had been entered 3 weeks later. Lower numbers, worse projections, different signatures. The submission email had come from Brendan's account. The receiving account had been a numbered shell in Westcott Petroleum's investment arm. $16 million had moved into a personal trust under Brendan's middle name within 40 days of the project's cancellation. She printed everything. She walked out of the building with a banker's box under her arm and did not look at the security guard. At the apartment, she set the box on the kitchen table. Ethan came out of Hazel's room in his sock feet. He saw the box. He sat down across from it and did not open it for a long time. He put his hand on the lid. He took it off again. Then he did open it. He read his own work back to himself for the first time in 3 years. His hand on the page was unsteady. He turned a sheet, then another. He did not speak. The bakery downstairs had been closed for 2 hours, and the building had gone soft and dark around them. Sienna watched him from across the table. She did not look at the papers. She looked at his face. Halfway through the binder, he found a page she had not bothered to read closely. Margin notes. His own handwriting. 3 years younger. A small drawing in the corner of the page, in a different hand. A stick figure. A heart. The letter K. His wife's initial. He set his hand flat on the page. He held it there. She used to draw on my drafts, he said. His voice was very quiet. Whenever I brought work home, she said the engineering was lonely without something soft on it. I didn't know. You couldn't have. I'm not asking you to come back, Sienna said quietly. I'm not asking you to fight him. I just thought you deserved to know what was true. He looked up at her. His eyes were wet, and he did not hide it. He reached across the table and took her hand. Not held. Took. The way a man takes hold of something he has decided to keep. He did not say anything. He did not have to. Her phone rang. Margaret, listen to me carefully, the older woman said. He's hired someone. A private investigator. He's asking about Hazel, about her school, about her route home. Sienna, you need to get ahead of this. Tonight. Sienna set the phone down. Ethan was already standing. His face had changed. The quiet that had been in him a moment before was still there, but it had hardened around the edges. It was no longer the quiet of a man who had given up. The summit is Friday, she said. I know. Will you come with me? Yes. The Boston Harbor Hotel ballroom held 400 investors that Friday night. Crystal, cold light. A long stage. A row of cameras at the back. The ice sculptures on the rear table had been carved into the Ashford monogram and were already, very slowly, beginning to weep. Richard Ashford stood at the lectern in his navy suit. Brendan stood 3 feet to his right, smiling the smile of a man who had already won. Good evening, Richard began. Tonight, Ashford Holdings announces, Excuse me, Father. Sienna walked up the side stairs. Ethan walked behind her, in the same dark suit he had worn to dinner a month earlier, carrying a slim leather folio. The ballroom went quiet. I'd like 5 minutes, Sienna said, before you announce anything. Richard looked at her. He looked at Ethan. He looked at the 400 faces watching, and the cameras, and at Brendan, whose smile had not moved but whose hand on the lectern edge had gone white. Richard stepped back from the microphone. 5 minutes. Sienna took the lectern. The screen behind her changed. The original test data came up, side by side with the falsified set. The email metadata, the transfer dates, the shell account, the $16 million. She did not raise her voice. This is the report that was killed 3 years ago. This is the report that was filed in its place. These are the emails that moved the second one into the record. This is the account that received the payment. In the name of a trust I had to subpoena to read. The signature on the cancellation order belongs to one man in this company. He is standing on this stage. He is also the man who, this week, hired a private investigator to follow a 7-year-old child to her elementary school. I would like that on the record as well. A murmur went through the room. A camera flashed. Ethan stepped forward. He set the folio on the lectern. He did not read from it. My name is Ethan Carter. I led the geothermal program at Ashford Holdings between 2019 and 2022. The pilot system in western Massachusetts produced 5.7 megawatts of baseload energy at a cost ratio of 0.8 to 1 to natural gas. The thermal recovery cycle ran within design parameters across all 4 seasons. The technology works. It worked then. It works now. I am not here to accuse anyone of anything. I am here so that the record reflects what the engineers in that building actually built. He paused. He did not look at Brendan. He looked instead at the third row of the ballroom, where 2 of his old engineers, who had also been let go that month 3 years ago, were sitting in borrowed suits. Most of those engineers are not in this room tonight. Some of them never worked again. I would like their names on the record too. They are in the folio on this lectern. He stepped back from the microphone. The silence in the room was the silence of 400 people understanding, all at once, that the man Brendan had spent 10 minutes calling a failed engineer had just spoken about a power plant the way a surgeon speaks about a heart. Richard Ashford stood. He walked to the front of the stage. He took the microphone. 3 years ago, he said, I signed a project cancellation order that I did not read in full. I trusted the man who handed it to me. I should not have. Mr. Locke is no longer employed by this company. Effective tonight, the Westcott merger will not proceed. Mr. Carter, on behalf of Ashford Holdings, I owe you an apology, not because my daughter brought you here, because I should have read the file. The ballroom began, slowly, to applaud. It started in the third row, where the 2 old engineers sat. It moved in waves. By the time it reached the back of the room, several investors were on their feet. Hotel security came up the side aisle for Brendan. He did not resist. He walked out with his hands at his sides and his face very still. Sienna turned to Ethan. She did not embrace him. She simply lifted her hand and touched his shoulder. Once. It was enough. 6 weeks later, the bakery on Hanover Street opened at 6. By 6:15, the smell of yeast and butter was climbing the stairs. Ethan stood at the stove in a clean white t-shirt, scrambling eggs. Sienna sat on a stool at the counter in one of his old flannels, her hair loose, a printout of a thermal plant siting study in front of her. Hazel was at the table with her crayons, working seriously on something she would not let either of them see. Ethan was not on the Ashford payroll. He had filed papers 2 weeks earlier for Carter Geothermal Systems, LLC, with offices in a converted warehouse in Somerville and a staff of 9, 6 of whom had been with him at Ashford and had been waiting, in their various small lives, for someone to call them back. Ashford Holdings was one of his contracts. So were 2 utilities in Vermont and a research consortium at MIT. He answered to no one. The doorbell rang at 7. Richard Ashford stood on the landing in a long wool coat, holding a small paper bag from the bakery downstairs and a wrapped box. May I come in? Sienna stepped back from the door. Richard sat down at the small kitchen table, where he had never sat before. He set the bag on the table. He held the wrapped box on his knees for a moment, as if uncertain. He held it out to Hazel. I was told you liked to draw. Hazel opened it carefully. A new tin of crayons. 64 colors. Her eyes went very round. There's gold. There is. She climbed down from her chair and walked to him. She did not ask. She simply leaned against his knee, the way children do when they have decided. Richard looked down at the small head against his leg. He set one large hand, very gently, on her back. He had not held a child since Sienna was 6. Will you show me the picture? He asked. She climbed into his lap and laid the drawing across his knees. 4 people, a mother and a father and a child and an older man with white hair, holding hands in a row. Richard looked at it for a long time. He did not speak. He took out a clean handkerchief and pretended to clean his glasses. Later, after Hazel had gone to her room to color the new gold, Ethan and Sienna stood at the window over Hanover Street. The morning light came in flat and pale across the brick. Ethan reached into his pocket. He set a small box on the windowsill between them. He did not open it. "It isn't to finish anything," he said. "It's to begin something. With you, with her, with whatever comes next. No paper, no contract. Just a question." Sienna looked at the box. She looked at him. She did not answer with words. She lifted her hand and placed it over his on the windowsill, and left it there. Behind them, at the kitchen table, Hazel was bent over her drawing. She added a fourth figure. Then, after a moment of thought, she added a fifth, smaller, four-legged. A tail, 2 ears. She looked up at the back of the 2 adults at the window. Then she looked at her grandfather, who was still sitting at the table with the bakery bag he had not unpacked, watching the morning light move across the brick of the building across the street. She added a 6th figure on the page, smaller still, old, with white hair. She smiled and kept drawing.